Good morning, everybody. We're live from the birdhouse. It is Tuesday, September 13th, and today we're talking about some of the different items you can use to attract birds to your backyard as we're getting into the cooler fall months. There are some things you can do in your yard to prep a little bit for the birds. And as always, we love to know who's on. You can say hello in the comments. If you have any kind of sightings, we love to hear those. We're just about at the very end of peak monarch migration, so curious if you saw a lot of monarchs at all this past week or weekend, and curious if you've seen any kind of different or new bird activity. Because birds are starting to group up to migrate as well. Over the weekend, I happened to see a group of 4 kestrels all chasing after each other, all grouped together, which was pretty neat. I've never seen that many all together like that. So that was a pretty cool sighting. Saw several monarchs floating around the fields. Not a huge group of monarchs, but it did see quite a few out there, more so than I have been seeing. So that was pretty neat. So as always, we love to know your sightings. If you have any kind of questions, you can throw those in too. We do have some different events happening here at the birdhouse. So our photo contest is still going on. You've got another just about a week to submit your photos. The contest ends on the 18th. That is the last date for submission. And in order to enter, you can print out any 2 8x10 photos and send them in or bring them in to us, as long as they are of something that fits in one of our categories, which are birds, wildlife, scenery. We have a pets division, we have a youth division. So as long as they are photos that you took and they have been taken out in the wild. Pets don't really apply as far as that goes, but as long as your photos were taken somewhere out in the wild, not in captivity, not in a zoo, anything like that. And we do ask that they are wildlife and scenery from the United States. So you can submit your photos through the end of the day, Sunday. That is the last submission date. And we'll have judges come in next week, and they will judge the photos, and we'll announce those as soon as we know the winners. And we will have our customers' favorite voting happening next week as well. So that'll start as soon as we have finished accepting the photos. We will start the customer's choice voting. So you have all week to still submit your photos. So that is going on. On Saturday, we have our jigsaw puzzle swap. So that went really well last month. So Saturday from 10 until noon, you can bring in any jigsaw puzzles you have and swap them out. We've got a pretty good stash. We've had people dropping off puzzles that they just don't want in their houses anymore. So if you came last month, we have even more puzzles than we did last month, and we've had a lot of people coming in and swapping them out during that event. So we should have a whole different stash than what you saw last time. So that is on Saturday. Bring your jigsaw puzzles in, and you can swap them out for brand new to you, I should say, new puzzles to you. We have that going on from 10 until noon. Some other things we've got going on in the store. We've got our Halloween merchandise is starting to roll out. We've got some fun and new different things. So if you're looking to spruce up your house as we get into spooky season, we've got not only things for inside your home, but we do have some really fun outdoor garden stakes and art that is all Halloween themed that's coming out as well. So we've got those going on. If you've been spending any time outdoors, you might be unlucky enough to come across ticks. They're active. Sometimes even in the winter months, you can get ticks on you, which is kind of scary. But we do still have some of these tick keys in, so I thought I would mention that as well, especially if you're going to be going out hiking in the fall foliage, all that kind of stuff, that you can get a hitchhiker on you that you don't necessarily want. And we do have these tick keys, and they will remove not only the tick's body, but the head if it's embedded inside the skin of you or a pet. These are really great to always keep in your backpack or on a keychain, something like that. And then there's always the bug spray too. We've got this Wildwood bug spray, which is my personal favorite. It's all made in New York. There's no DEET or anything like that in it. It smells pretty good as far as bug spray goes. It kind of smells like cloves. So that's a really good one that I always keep in my bag as well. So that's enough as far as promotion goes, as far as talking about different things that you can put in your yard and some updates about what people are seeing. As far as hummingbirds go, people are still getting hummingbirds. So it's hard to say whether or not hummingbirds that have been in your backyard all season, if it's the same ones that you're seeing. If you can tell if you've got the same ones coming around the same time every day, then they're probably still the same hummingbirds you had all season long, but there's still some flowing through from up north. So people will still probably be seeing hummingbirds through the end of the month in general. That's when they really start fizzling, and really we don't see many sightings into early October. So in general, around Labor Day is when they first start to leave, but people are still getting them. So don't be surprised if you have hummingbirds coming to your feeders for the next couple of weeks. We do still have some of the ready to use nectar. We've got the concentrates that you can just add water to as far as putting out nectar for them. And you can always make your own using white granulated sugar and water. And the recipe is 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. So you just want to boil that water, add the sugar, mix it up, of course, let it cool, and then you can fill your feeders with that. So curious if you guys have any hummingbirds still. I'd love to hear that. You can put those in the comments. Same with orioles. For the most part, it seems like orioles have really left. Every once in a while, we'll get a customer coming in now that says they do still have them. But in general, over the past week, the sightings of orioles have really dropped off. So if you're not seeing orioles anymore, that is totally common. That it would be kind of rare to see them in your backyard still. So if you have your oriole feeder in your backyard, you can always take that down, or you can repurpose it. So most oriole feeders have some kind of a cup or a dish that you can put jelly in. You can use that for different things. You can put mealworms in it, or one thing you can do. You can even just put seeds in it as well. You could put some sunflower seed in there. You could put some safflower seed, peanuts. You could do anything like that. So you repurpose some of these feeders. And if you're lucky enough to have bluebirds, if you put something like mealworms in your oriole feeder, you can get the bluebirds coming eating those mealworms. So just because the orioles are gone doesn't mean that you can't use your oriole feeder anymore. And water is always a good way to attract birds. So we're still in the season where you can put out water without any kind of heater. We'll be putting out our heated bird baths and bird bath heaters this week at the store. We've been getting a lot of people asking about them and preparing for the months ahead. But right now, you can still absolutely keep your water feeders out, whether it be bird bath, whether it be something like this, a hanging, almost like a water cooler feeder. We still have probably a couple months to go until you have to take those down until it's too cold and they'll start to freeze. If you are lucky enough to still be getting hummingbirds, you can put out the misters. The misters are still good to go. These connect to a hose and they make a really fine mist. And if you've ever been outside watering your flowers, or if you have a mister or any kind of moving water feature, you might have been lucky enough to see a hummingbird will fly through the mist. So that is a really good way to attract hummingbirds, is with some kind of a misting feature, whether it be something you connect to your hose, or whether it be something like the solar bubblers or solar fountains that you put in your bird bath. They will make the water move, and not only will the birds drink from this, and the moving water does attract more birds. The sight and sound of it does attract a lot of birds. But if it is a fine enough mist, hummingbirds will sometimes fly right through it, which is really cool and fun to see. As far as maintenance goes in the backyard, there's a few things you might want to do right around now. Is a good time to start doing some maintenance. As far as cleaning up plants and stems and sticks and that kind of thing in your yard, it's been recommended through the Audubon Society and all other kinds of bird conservation organizations that having actually kind of a messy yard that is full of twigs and sticks and leaves is really good for the birds. It's good for the insects, really. It gives them their habitat. You're not clearing away their eggs or their larvae for the following year. So having kind of a messy yard is really actually good for birds and wildlife. So not only does it lessen the pressure on you, but you can also be doing something good for wildlife by kind of keeping your yard a little bit wild. So at least part of your yard. I know sometimes if it gets a little too unruly, it might make the neighbors upset, but it will absolutely help wildlife to keep your yard a little bit messier this fall. As far as maintenance goes and some things that you can do in your yard now, though, one thing you can do is mason bee house, some management there. If you do have mason bee houses in your backyard, you've probably seen there's not that much activity coming and going from them right now. And if you have some way to store them, you can. So, for example, these tubes here, this is a typical mason bee tubes. If they've been in use, they'd be capped with mud. One thing you can do is keep them in a safe spot, because if you have things like woodpeckers coming to your yard all winter long, sometimes they're known to raid these for the bee larvae. What you can do is you can harvest the tubes, you can take the tubes out, or you can just take the house down itself and store these in a cool location. So that would be somewhere outside, like in a garage. You don't want to put them in your basement or anything like that. It's just a little too warm. And if it's too warm for too long, then you're going to have some bees hatching out, probably in the middle of winter inside your home, which you really, really probably don't want. So one thing you can do, though, is you can keep these somewhere where they do get airflow. You can put them in, if you have a pop-up insect house, something like that, like a screened in little kind of mesh pop-up. You can put your tubes in there, or your house itself, and that way they're protected from some predators that might go for them in the winter months. That being said, if you don't have a garage, like personally I don't have one, I just leave mine out all winter long, but sometimes I will cover it with a kind of a mesh or a screen. I'll just staple that over the entrance of the house so things can't get into it. So that's another thing you can do to protect them. And then in the early spring, take that screen off so the young can emerge. So mason bee house management is one thing that you can do right now. And then also birdhouse management. So probably noticed you're not getting a ton of activity in your birdhouses right now as far as birds coming and going. If you do have birds nesting right now in a house, they're probably house sparrows. But in general, I haven't seen any birds coming and going out of my houses for the last like 2-3 weeks or so. So now is a good time to clean out those nests that are in your birdhouses. So as when we talk about birdhouses all the time, we're saying that the most important thing is to have a house that has some kind of an opening so you can clean it out, so you can remove that nest, you can remove any kind of debris that's in there. So now's a perfect time to do that, to go through the yard, open up those houses, remove those nests. We do have some enzymes you can use to spray in that house to kind of break down anything that might be in there. But now is an absolute great time. Once the young fledge in general, you can always remove those nests, even if it's in spring, and the birds will make another nest. If you happen to open up the house and there's birds inside, there's still birds inside, just close it up and give it a couple more weeks and they should be on their own. If you have roosting houses, which are bird houses that have perches inside of them, now's the time to think about swapping out your bird houses for those roosting houses as well. So now's about that time. And if you have the roosting pouches, these little huts like this, and you don't keep them out in the yard all year, if you put them away for the spring and summer, now is also the time to start bringing these out as well. And I tuck them in different shrubs in my backyard, and it's a really good place for the birds to go in and stay out of the elements like the snow and the rain and the wind. So you can put several of these out, and they're kind of small for birds to nest in, so they're not really something they're going to use during nesting season, but they're really great for those colder months that we're getting into where the birds need a little bit more protection. So now's the time to start pulling out your roosting pockets as well. And if you need some replacements, we do have a whole bunch. And sometimes after a couple years or so, these cords fray. You can always replace them, or you can use a little S-hook. We have little metal S-hooks that you can kind of jam in the top of these to give them more life if you have had one that has the string break, which does happen over time. You can kind of give them a little bit of an extra life there by adding a little string on the top or adding a hook there as well. And as far as fall cleanup stuff goes, if you're doing some raking and cleaning up underneath your feeders, if you're finding that there's lots of shells and you're kind of getting discouraged that it's a lot of work to clean up underneath your feeders, you can of course switch to a shellless seed, and I'll show you some of those in a minute here. But you can also put something like this, like a seed hoop underneath the feeder. We get a lot of questions from people who have things like of course squirrels, but then also maybe some animals like rats coming to their backyards. They're saying, how can I still feed the birds but keep some of these unwanted critters out of my yard? One way is to make sure that things aren't really falling on the ground, which can be quite difficult when you have all kinds of birds and things feeding and throwing seed around. But a seed hoop is a really good way to help keep things off the ground. And what this is, it comes in different sizes, but it's a mesh hoop, and you can hang it right from your feeder, so it'll catch things as the birds feed from the feeders. You know, they're always throwing seeds and shells and things like that on the ground, but this will help catch them. So the one I just showed is 16 inches in diameter. We have them in that size. We've got them in a 24-inch size. We've got them in a 30-inch size, so you can get a really, really large one if you do have a large area where the birds are throwing the seed and the shells, and that can really help to alleviate some of those unwanted critters, or just to kind of keep your yard cleaner. It can be really, really helpful in that regard. As far as feeders go, the best thing you can always have out as far as getting the most diversity of birds is something that is for sunflower seed or a sunflower seed mix, something like this style. This is called a hopper feeder. There's lots of room inside of there for a whole bunch of seeds, so you don't have to fill them all too often. They're popular too because they usually have a lot of big perches, lots of perching room there. And the perching room is important for larger birds like the cardinals. And if you're lucky enough to get those evening grosbeaks, hopefully we'll have another good winter season where there's some of those winter finches that are kind of rare. The evening grosbeaks get lumped into that group. Something like this would be perfect for those grosbeaks because it does have a lot of perching room. And you can put just about anything. You can put a sunflower seed, just straight sunflower or sunflower seed mix, anything like that would go into these. And they're usually wood, but a lot of them are now turning into recycled plastic, which makes it easier to clean. So I like the recycled plastic styles because you can really scrub them when it comes time to clean your feeders. The recycled plastic are really, really easy to clean. You can soak them in hot soapy water. That does most of the work for you, and then you can scrub them out. Talking about seed, the seed makes all the difference, and if you've experimented with different types of seed, you probably know that already. The best thing you can do is put out some kind of a sunflower seed mix. That'll give you the biggest diversity out of any type of seed and feeder. So a feeder with sunflower seed or sunflower seed mix is ideal. This is our chickadee blend. This is our best seller. You'll notice there's not a lot of little yellow stuff in it. There's not cracked corn. There's not millet in there. And we try to avoid those in our blends because the birds tend to just throw that on the ground, and they're going for the bigger pieces. So they're going for the peanuts and they're going for the sunflower seeds. So the type of seed absolutely makes a difference. The freshness of the seed makes a difference too. So if you have some kind of a sunflower seed or a sunflower seed mix and the birds haven't been eating it, it could be something that has been sitting around for a while. And if it goes bad, the birds really don't like that. So it might be time to dump it out, get fresh and brand new seed, and that'll make all the difference. So here we get our deliveries in every week. So our seed is always super, super fresh. And you've probably noticed the difference if you buy your seed here versus other places that the birds definitely do come to the feeders with the fresh seed faster than they do the other stuff. If you're looking for something without shells, which is what I have been kind of transferring to in my yard over the years, sunflower hearts are just the inside of the sunflower seed. Really, any kind of bird that's going to come to a bird feeder, as far as a seed feeder, will eat these sunflower hearts. So you can't go wrong with those at all. And they don't leave a mess. So you won't find that there's stuff underneath the feeder that you need to rake up. There's not going to be any shells. There's not going to be any sunflower hearts that are even left because they love it so, so much. And if you want a blend that has, that is also shellless, but has a little bit more to it, this is our Woodpecker Blend. It's definitely a high-end blend, but this is what I use in all my mixed seed feeders. It's a lot of sunflower hearts in there. It's peanuts too. So that's what I like about it a lot, that there's the peanut pickouts in there because the chickadees love that. The woodpeckers love it. The nuthatches love it. So it's definitely a high-end blend, but I don't have to worry about all the shells, but the dogs eating the shells, or about, a bunch of critters underneath the feeders trying to see if there's anything inside those shells that are underneath the feeder. So this is a really good one as well. We also have a blend called Meat Treat that is totally shellless. So we've got some different options for you if you want to go totally shellless. And if you've got blackbirds that are raiding your feeders still, I noticed over the weekend some pretty big flocks of grackles. They seem to be grouping up and migrating, going down south. If you still have blackbirds coming, there's always the safflower seed. The safflower seed, the grackles don't like. Starlings, which are going to be here all winter, they don't like this safflower seed either. And squirrels tend not to like it either. So you can put this in your feeder. You want to make sure to put just the straight safflower in the feeder. If you mix it with things, the birds will just throw the safflower on the ground and go for the seeds that they're looking for. So putting straight safflower out is really the best way to go if you're trying to keep those blackbirds at bay. And cardinals love safflower. House finches love the safflower. I get chickadees coming to it, so you can still get a really good diversity of birds with that safflower seed as well. And as far as feeders go, if you are trying to keep squirrels out of your feeders, because I'm sure if you've ever put out a bird feeder, you notice, okay, you get birds, but then all of a sudden the squirrels come, and it doesn't take them very long at all to find the feeder. We do have a whole bunch of different types of squirrel-proof feeders. These squirrel busters are really the best out of all of them. I think they're our best sellers as well. They're easy to clean, easy to take apart, and they're not super expensive, and they have a lifetime warranty, all that good stuff. But what's most important is they actually keep the squirrels out. So some squirrel-proof feeders are kind of hit or miss, but these squirrel busters are so, so good. Basically, with this style here, a squirrel will go on the perch, and they are so heavy that they will make this little cage shut down. So the squirrels can't get to the bird seed, but the birds absolutely can. So squirrels are heavy enough to set these off. The birds are so light you can get several of them at a time on a feeder like this, and they still won't shut it down. So it's kind of crazy to think about one squirrel being heavier than several birds, but that is the case. The birds are mostly feathers. Their bones are all hollow, so you can get a whole bunch of birds on that feeder, but as soon as a squirrel gets on it, it totally shuts down. If you're looking for something that's small and squirrel proof, we just got these in. I thought these were pretty cute. They're a little seed feeder, a sunflower seed feeder, and it's got the cage around it, but it's more of a rounded cage, and they're not too big either. So this is good for a small space. Now with cages around them like this, they do keep squirrels out, so that's wonderful, but they'll also keep larger birds out too. So again, if you're having issues with larger blackbirds raiding your feeders, something like this is great, but it'll also keep cardinals out. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you're putting sunflower seed in there, or some kind of a sunflower seed mix, usually you're going to get, unless you have something underneath it to catch those seeds, you're going to get some on the ground. And cardinals naturally feed off the ground anyway, so people tend to still get the cardinals. Even with something like this, they'll just feed off the ground. So just a cute new style here of squirrel-proof feeder, something that is small. You could just get started off with, and it's only $21.95. So really good feeder for the price. So that is something brand new. And we do have window feeders as we get into the cooler months. I know it can be a bit much to go through the yard and have to refill the feeders all the time, but window feeders are great in the winter months. And now is really the time to get them because you want to put them on the window when it's warm enough that it's still 50 degrees or warmer. If you try to put these on your window in the middle of winter, they just don't stick very well. So the key to getting these to stick is to put them on the window when it's at least 50 degrees outside. And something else you can do, another little tip here for window feeders, you can moisten the suction cups, but if you use a little bit of oil, that can even make them work better. You don't want a lot because that'll just make the feeder just like slide down the window, but just a tiny, tiny bit of oil, olive oil, vegetable oil, anything like that. You can put that on the suction cups, stick that to the window, and that will make it adhere really good to really well to the window there. So just another tip. So now is the time to really put those on your windows so they will get attached. And once they're on there firmly, they'll stay all winter long as you don't get something like a big squirrel jumping on it over and over again. Sometimes that'll make them fall down, but otherwise they'll adhere and stick to the window all winter long. If you are trying to attract a huge diversity of birds with one feeder, something that has a cage around it will limit the hopper feeders, depending on how much perching room can limit some birds there. But tray feeders are good for everybody. They're wide open. Cardinals love things like this. There's nothing up top to keep birds from flying in. So tray feeders are fantastic, especially again if you're trying to get grosbeaks in the winter. Purple finches love things like this. Cardinals love the wide open platform. So we've got a whole bunch of platform feeders, and now a lot of them come with this mesh grate on them as well, so it's good for drainage, so you don't have to worry about it getting moldy and things. You're always going to want to clean them out a little bit, but with the drainage on there, that makes it great as far as keeping the seed fresh longer. You don't have to worry about it piling up and getting moldy and that kind of thing. And if you've got finch feeders out, now might be the time where you want to consider putting out some feeder fresh. So with finch feeders, here's a finch feeder here. We carry a bunch that have bases that pop out, so they're super easy to clean, but they don't all have that feature. Like this one, for example, just a small, inexpensive finch feeder. The base does come out if you unscrew it, but that can be a little cumbersome. So you might find if you have a feeder that doesn't get cleaned out as often, it gets moldy in the bottom, which is not a good thing for the birds. So put like this feeder fresh in the feeder will help absorb some of that liquid that makes the mold grow. This is the same company that makes the liquid you can put in your hummingbird feeders to keep the nectar fresh longer. You just put a little layer of these feeder fresh granules in the bottom of your feeder. You fill it up with your Niger seed or your Finch favorite blend, and then you top it off with some more of this feeder fresh, and it'll just absorb some of that moisture so you don't get mold in your feeders, which tends to happen as we get into the winter months more often, or whenever we have kind of a wet season, which it's been a little bit more rainy over the past few days than it has been all summer long. So that's something you can put in your finch feeders to keep them a little bit more fresh, to keep the seed fresh for the birds. So that's something you can think about. And if you've got feeders that need to be cleaned, we do have our feeder cleaning event happening later on this month. That's going to be on Saturday, September 24th. But you can bring your feeders in any day that week. So starting next Monday, the 19th, you can drop your feeders off here to give us kind of a leg up so we can start working on them. Drop them off. We'll give you a call when they're done. We do that for absolutely free. So that is going to be going on next week. So if you've got some feeders that could use a little bit of TLC, you can take them down, pour them out if you can, and bring them in, and we'll take care of them and give you a call when that's all done. And then finally, there is suet. So as it starts getting cooler out, you might notice that the birds are going for more fat and things that have more fat in them in your backyard, and suet is a major one. And lots of birds will eat suet, not just woodpeckers. So um, birds like nuthatches love it, and the chickadees, and you might get blue jays, things like that. Carolina wrens are another one that have been coming to suet feeders quite often for people. And suet are just these blocks of fat here. Of course, we have hot pepper suet to keep the squirrels out. If you happen to be getting squirrels eating your suet, the hot pepper is actually our best seller. Squirrels can taste the hot pepper in it, and the birds don't have as many taste buds, so it doesn't bother them. So this is a really good one. If you've ever put out a suet feeder, you might have just had a little cage like this, which is fine for the little birds. The downy woodpeckers can feed from this just fine, chickadees and Carolina wrens. But our best sellers are actually these larger feeders that are called paddle-tail suet feeders. And you can see that there's a projection here, and this is great for the larger woodpeckers. Like if you happen to have the red-bellied woodpeckers, the hairy woodpeckers, pileated woodpeckers, they can more easily feed on something like this. So they'll cling onto the mesh here with their feet, and then they'll use this as a tail prop to keep them upright when they're feeding. Otherwise, they tend to kind of flip around and flop around on the feeder, and it can be kind of awkward for them. So paddle tail feeders are fantastic. The one I just showed you is our best-selling size, but we also have it in twice as large. This is good, especially if you've got the pileated woodpeckers. So this is made especially for them. It has a really, really long paddle tail, and it holds 2 suet cakes. So another good thing about this is, as it's cooler in the cooler months, you don't have to fill it as often because it holds 2 suet cakes. So we do have those as well. And then there's also these larger suet feeders here for large cakes of suet. So normally people buy these smaller, just like average size suet cakes, but there are larger feeders like this one that hold really large blocks of suet. So something like this is good if you're getting the suet directly from, say, a butcher or something like that. Or you can get these large, we've got these big 3-pound suet bricks like this that'll go into a feeder like that. So you really don't have to fill these too often, which is really, really good once it starts getting cold out there. So that's another option. And then lastly, there are the seed logs, which have been super, super popular with everybody. They don't go as fast as the loose seed does. The birds really have to work on these. They peck away at them, so it takes them a little bit of time to really go through these. Whereas I'm filling my feeders, depending on the size, every day or every other day with loose seed. These logs will last more like a week, depending on the size. We have some that are even larger. Those can sometimes last a couple of weeks. So they don't go as fast as loose seed does. So if you're looking for a way to save some money, or if you're going away for a while and you want to make sure that the birds still have food while you're away, these are fantastic. They've got a hole drilled through the center there, and they just will slide onto a feeder like this that has a rod down the center, and then the birds will perch on this and they'll feed from the log. So another really cool way to feed the birds, and it's really, really simple. We have these logs in different flavors, if you will. This is a woodpecker mix. We've got safflower logs for the cardinals, and we also have a hot pepper style, which is our best seller, that the squirrels won't eat. So all kinds of fun things for you to feed the birds this fall. Looks like there's some people on with comments and questions. And let's see who we've got on here. Randy says, good morning, Liz and everybody. Randy says, had my last hummingbird visit last Wednesday. My neighbors texted me to let me know there was a hummingbird at my feeder. So sounds like Randy has had hummingbirds in the last week or so, but it sounds like they're starting to fizzle out, which is pretty common with most people, but don't be surprised if you see them for a couple more weeks. Kathy says, had 12 monarch butterflies last night. All right, so Kathy is seeing some monarch butterfly action, and yeah, we've got a couple more days where we're in that peak migration time But even just like the hummingbirds, you'll still see monarchs even after this peak migration time. Now is just the time, at least in our area here in upstate New York by Lake Ontario, where we're going to have our peak migration flowing through the area. Whistles to Animals is on, says, "Hello, Liz. Love your presentations. In my city setting, I'm not seeing my chipping sparrow anymore. Also, not seeing any grackles. Now 100% of my peanuts can go to blue jays and cardinals." All right, so both chipping sparrows and grackles are migratory, so they might have gone further down south and they might be gone for the rest of the year. But keep your eyes out for things like tree sparrows will start to come back, and those are going to be more of our winter sparrow. And things like white-throated sparrow, you might see white-throated sparrow underneath your feeders. You might see white-crowned sparrows. So while some of them are leaving, you'll start to see some other species. Juncos are another sparrow species that will have all winter long, so people will start seeing more and more of them as well. Dina is on. She says, "Good morning, everyone. We still have hummingbirds and lots of bees enjoying the feeders as well." Yeah, there's definitely lots of bees out there. Honeybees, there's wasps out there. So that's been a challenge for some people. I understand that. When you have nectar out, you'll definitely get some insect activity coming as well. Dina says, "I like to leave some twigs and branches that have fallen from the trees. The birds seem to enjoy playing on and around them." Yeah, it's good places to perch. It's good places for them to sit and rest, and good places for them to scour and look for food. So it's always good to keep some kind of debris out there for the birds and for the insects and wildlife. Looks like that's everybody's comments and questions. We will be back on Saturday with another broadcast where we'll share with you some more birds that are migrating through the area. There's lots of things in bloom still, like goldenrod are a fine example. Asters are in bloom. We'll give you an update on what kind of species you'll see in bloom and what you might find on them. And of course, we'll share your photos as well. So you can always submit your photos to us and we'll share those on our broadcast Saturday. And also on Saturday, we have our jigsaw puzzle swap. So keep that in mind. That will be going on from 10 until noon. And we'll be back on Saturday at 10 with another broadcast. And until then, enjoy your week and we will see you soon.